Hello, Brian from the channel Brian. Here are the last few months worth of movies that I saw but didn't review. Here's the inside scoop on my thoughts on all of them. Check it out. So I caught up and watched the new Conjuring movie, and it wasn't good. I think James Wan stepping away from directing these doesn't bode well for the series. At least we got Malignant out of him. The scares in this are all really telegraphed and blunt. This one in particular is filled with a ton of incredibly silly visuals that are difficult to take seriously. This is based on a case where the Warrens tried proving demon possession in court, but after a while I think the movie forgets about that. It turns into just another regular mystery possession conjuring movie, but worse than the first two. Even Farmiga and Wilson seem really bored. From a production standpoint, way more than the others, this one just seems rushed. Right in the first scene, Patrick Wilson yells, "No," but he clips the mic, or the compression was too high. You should have really just done another take or something. I'll be honest with you, I barely remember anything about this movie, and I'm writing this the day after I saw it. I'm giving this one a 3 out of 10. Another movie I saw was King Richard, and I was not really a fan of it. This is not one of the worst movies of the year, but it is definitely one of the year's worst ideas. I mean, this is the kind of biopic constantly winking to the audience with predictive dialogue about the subject's eventual fame, but that's not the problem. This movie really builds up Serena and Venus Williams, but it is not about them. Instead, it's about their dad. Yeah, why would I want to watch a movie about two of the greatest athletes of our era when I could watch a movie about their dad? Forget about Venus Williams, we have Will Smith. For a movie that's so one-sided in his favor so he can maybe win an Oscar, it's ironic that while Jon Bernthal's performance is not as showy, he was way more believable as his character. There was some nice sound design during the tennis matches, but then Will Smith farts, and it's literally a stock sound effect I can download for free off of YouTube. Yeah. And it's not like this movie just slightly prioritizes Richard's story over Serena and Venus. No, the Williams sisters are basically pawns for the other characters to talk about. I don't know, it kind of undermines the characters ceaselessly worshipping their talents when the movie itself doesn't agree enough to give them any plot presence. It is the latest formulaic, schmaltzy, Oscar bait attempt by Will Smith that, in my opinion, takes advantage of the Williams sisters more than it honors them. 4 out of 10. Also, I saw Reminiscence, which was quite bad. This is a science fiction neo-noir trying to masquerade itself as high concept, but every aspect of it lacks any depth whatsoever. The characters, the mystery, the world building, none of this could possibly captivate an audience demanding anything but the superficial. It is incredibly derivative of other movies, but namely Strange Days and Inception. Nolan's influence especially is felt everywhere, but if you heavily accentuated just the parts of screenwriting he's worst at. Reminiscence is straining so hard to be meaningful, but keeps insisting on that meaning rather than actually bothering to demonstrate it. Sometimes there's a neat visual or two in these massive, half-sunken cities, I guess. As seriously as it all takes itself, it all comes across both overly melodramatic and incredibly unmotivated to earn that solemnity. Should have called it Lame Runner, going with the 4. Ghostbusters Afterlife is proof movies can be terrible experiences for so many other reasons than just because they're bad. This is one of the most tonally unfaithful sequels I've ever seen in my life. Jason Reitman, or at least his PR team, is convinced this is giving Ghostbusters back to the fans. Except the fans they're giving it back to are clearly the ones who see it through the same nerd crew-ass nostalgia goggles they see everything through and don't deserve nice things. If you value the property beyond the iconography in the slightest, this is an insult to the witty offbeat spirit of the original. It's just so much easier to notice the dumb corporate garbage behind a phony sentimental patchwork when I don't even think that patchwork should be there. Ghostbusters was a movie that broke most formula conventions I can think of. If you understood that, why is Ghostbusters Afterlife a sappy, nostalgia-driven, cookie-cutter, blockbuster action movie?
Why are you trying to be all things to all people?
Not a single word in that description except for movie describes Ghostbusters. The characters and tone are all flimsy since nothing in the movie exists for a reason other than getting us to another reference to the original. And beyond the obvious ones like the car and proton packs and Gozer, they're really scraping the bottom of the reference barrel here. Was the joke about the Crunch Bar really an iconic part of the first movie that feels like an Oni Plays joke? Even though not everything was terrible, the self-referential aspects of the film really overstayed their welcome to where I did not care about this movie at all, and I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. In a similar vein, we have Matrix Resurrections. Gee, this is just what we needed. Another movie trying to Force Awakens its franchise with a bunch of tactless references to the original. Resurrections is actually more focused than most movies trying to do this because it actually attempts utilizing that nostalgia bait for a narrative purpose, but its messaging is just so confused. This film regales against binaries, yet spends the first hour or so creating a pop culture schism within fans of the original and vehemently ridicules one side of it, thereby creating a binary, an us versus them scenario. There's a clear, deliberate meta-narrative about Lana having to make a new Matrix movie, and all this means for me is now I have to ask if certain elements are done terribly on purpose to really stick it to those people, and that's where you lose me. I think what Lana Wachowski was going for could have genuinely worked, but without any attempt to actually invest in the story, the characters, and action, what's the point? I think you need that foundation. Maybe it is protest art against the studio rebooting the property, like she wanted to ruin this continuation on her own terms, but I still didn't really enjoy it all that much. 5 out of 10. Next up is No Time to Die, the new James Bond. For a movie that's the finale for a 15-year-long story arc, why does everything feel so standard? The ante does not feel like it's been upped at all for this final installment. Like it's trying to be a climax, but also just another Bond movie, so when your dad catches it on TV, he still understands what's happening. This franchise's appeal has never reached me because, in my opinion, James Bond is a dodo-brained character. Every film is rigidly a power fantasy with 5 or so elements from which to judge each installment, which is fine. They introduced some lady to be the new 007, and I guess some people were mad because they don't want Bond to be a woman. And I think giving James Bond of all characters this long emotional arc is no more out of character than changing his gender would be. They literally gave him a prop child character in the latter half of the film. It is not the story or world of James Bond that makes it popular, and all your decisions are making the property less interesting. I saw nothing special in the story, nothing special in the action. It's got production value, which is not nothing, but that's about it. The scene in Cuba where Bond teams up with Ana de Armas was nice. She was the only one with charisma, but nobody else but Bond has much else to do. It was fine. I'm not offended that I saw it. Even if I was, there's no point. We're gonna get another reboot in a few years anyway. 5 out of 10. House of Gucci is trying really hard to win awards. And that doesn't mean everything was mediocre or bad about it. Just, you can really tell the good things about it only exist because there was a mountain of Oscar campaign money behind it. Fitting for the subject matter of Gucci, I just felt like I was watching a bunch of rich people pat themselves on the back for being rich. Like this is Ridley Scott's Crazy Rich Italians. Adam Driver was excellent as usual. Lady Gaga Madrigal was alright too, and I'll never say no to Al Pacino and Jeremy Irons actually trying, in the same movie no less. But put all these performances together and they're still not as good as Jared Leto was bad. Why is he treating his performance like a big joke? I know there's subjective licensing in biographies, but I doubt the real guy was this much of a cartoon character. This is trying to be a movie adjacent in tone to something like Goodfellas, but many parts of the story are just rushed. There's one scene with Jeremy Irons talking like normal, and it immediately cuts to him dead in a coffin. That was funny. There are a few things I enjoyed, however, all I really remember from it now was Jared Leto being the worst thing that happened to Italy since Chris Pratt was cast as Mario. 5 out of 10. Encanto is like just another victim of Disney's modern content culture. Not awful, mind you. I'd say it's not even an actual misfire like Raya and the Last Dragon. I just don't care. Like most of Disney's stuff, everything now feels like just another one of whatever brand it represents. I think a new Disney animated movie, especially, is always kind of working uphill being compared to older Disney movies where everything just seemed to be as fleshed out as it needed to be. And Encanto is as much going through the motions as I could imagine a Disney musical being in terms of character and especially music. Not a lot of this music really did anything for me. Miranda's songwriting just has no structure, no build, no escalation, things which Disney songs, for my tastes anyway, kinda need. I never seem to make any headway in the back and forth discourse about whether or not Disney is affirming different races or pandering to them with films like these, so the most I'll do is say it belongs in the pile of movies that do whichever you personally believe is happening. What does stand out is a lot of the art direction and some of the character designs. Mirabelle in particular I enjoyed because she's obviously supposed to be an outcast or on the outs with her family, but it's not like overdone and cringy. I have a hard time remembering moments that made me cringe with how hard they were trying to make her relatable. I've enjoyed recent Disney movies like Moana and Zootopia, so I don't think I'm just waterlogged with nostalgia. I didn't hate Encanto, but I also didn't love it. 5. Nightmare Alley is a character drama by Guillermo del Toro, but also a remake of a movie from the 1940s. This movie I also didn't love, but also didn't hate. It was kind of middle of the road, only sparingly exuding any of del Toro's signature eerie fairy tale attitude. Thematically, everything it does is kind of on the nose here, and the troubled rise and fall romance between Cooper and Mara did nothing for me, although their performances individually were fine. In fact, the entire supporting cast was really enjoyable, but their roles seemed like they'd play better to the acting sensibilities of the 40s, when the original came out. This movie also feels really long, like longer than it is. Thankfully though, for every scene which really seemed to overstay its welcome, there was at least one with some really stunning visuals. Or some fun character development, or something. I don't know if it's just a personal thing, but I don't think I've ever really loved a movie about the circus. I don't like any of the ones I've seen in recent years and can't think of any. Maybe it's just a setting that really doesn't appeal to me. Whatever, I'm giving Nightmare Alley a 5. Eternals is Marvel's most divisive movie, which is saying something. There's a lot of detail to comb through, but ultimately I liked the positives more than the negatives, which surprised me. Now, that could have something to do with how I firmly don't care about MCU lore anymore, so the consequences of the story are moot in my brain, of which there are many, so I sympathize with you if you still give a shit, and I get if that ruins the film for you. I guess I liked it because for the first time in a while, it felt like a filmmaker was working within the Marvel formula to give us something unique. There's a lot to navigate, but Chloe Zhao does an excellent job making it manageable. She was allowed to be a director of actors and characters who were allowed to be what they needed to be instead of blandly everything at once. There are 10 new characters in this film, and I remember them all. That is impressive. So many things I've despised about post-Endgame Marvel movies just aren't there. For example, mileage will always vary with comic relief, but in Eternals, a scene that's supposed to be serious is allowed to play out without comedy interrupting it, which is not always something you can say. When the characters discuss what their next move should be, it felt like real people having that discussion. There are many, many clunky and overly convenient aspects to this movie which I could harp on, but actually enjoying the story and characters in a Marvel movie this much again was nice. I thought I would hate it, but I didn't. If I knew this would have happened, I'd have given it a longer video, because there is a lot to say, but my schedule was sadly full. I realize it's kinda getting blasted by everybody, and there's a pretty good chance you might hate it too, but I can say at least that it's worth your time to decide for yourself. And I'm giving Eternals a 6 out of 10. And finally, the best movie I didn't review that I watched over the holidays was the HBO documentary Listening to Kenny G. This is partially a dive into Kenny's career, however, it is mainly about understanding the critical landscape surrounding his music. I really enjoyed the film's presentation as it really helped make the film more watchable, but I appreciated the most these interview segments with musical scholars and critics discussing him. Rather than skew one way towards blatant love or hatred for his music, the films made all the more likable by how level-headed and varied their critical opinions were, while still outlining why someone may feel his popularity causes harm to the jazz world. Their opinions are still fairly measured. This is one of the better films I've seen which tackle the nature of art which appeals to audiences but not critics. Now, what you have to know about jazz fans is they are abso-goddamn-lutely insane. They act like listening to music should be the same experience as staring dead into an overhead projector, but the dynamic between Kenny and critics very much transcends the medium. If you take out Kenny G and substitute Marvel, this is a discourse that shows itself every few months like a flaring arthritis within the film community. There's no denial that high and low art exist and are separate in this film, but it doesn't seem to judge people who find enjoyment in either of them. There's a contagious curiosity to understand Kenny's significance in culture which fuels filmmaker Penny Lane's journey. With so many talented artists out there, it's not a surprise that at least one of them sees inspiration from the unique appeals of lower art and decides that's just what they want to make. Contrary to popular belief, you actually need a talented artist to make good low art. A hack making hack art will make shit. But a genius inspired by lower forms of art will make something which best illustrates the unique craft of that form. This movie's not without moments which are a little bloated, but definitely check this one out. I found it very entertaining and thoughtful. 7 out of 10. So that's it. Did you like these movies more than me? Less than me? Well, if you care to, please tell me. And as always, if you like not only words, but the way I arrange and then say them, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to me, Brian from the channel Brian. Both of those things really help me with the algorithm. I'm dying here. Thank you and goodbye.